Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to this new video with a guest. So today my guest is Charlie Chapman from Revenue Cat. Welcome, Charlie.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here. And so today we're going to talk about a topic that I'm actually quite excited about because we're going to talk about best practices to build a paywall in a mobile app. So I myself have been working on an app that uses subscriptions for a year and a half. So I've been seeing a few things in this domain. I know it's a very important domain when you are doing a subscription app because it's basically what is bringing the money quite literally. So I'm really excited about this video, and of course, I have a big thank you to Revenue Cat for sponsoring this video. So maybe before we get started, if you want to remind us of what Revenue Cat is and what it can offer to iOS developers.
Yeah, so Revenue Cat is it's a mobile SDK and a whole, backend for making in-app purchases and subscriptions easy. Primarily for mobile apps, but we do have Stripe integrations and some web integrations as well. But yeah, like the big thing is it makes it kind of unbelievably easy to add in-app purchases in your app. There's an SDK you pull in, and this is on Android or iOS or some of the hybrid frameworks. And you can go from 0 to 1 extremely fast, which if anybody has done in-app purchases with Apple's or Google systems, it's not necessarily the easiest, but we focus a lot on making really good documentation, making the developer experience really good, so that 0 to 1 story is crazy fast and easy. And then the 1 to excellence story, we've been focusing on a lot too. So we have experiments, we have a brand new paywall SDK framework for doing the UI, and that integrates into the experiments so that you can optimize all of those. So we really try to make the developer story at the really fast indie or sort of hacker side, all the way up to your bigger company trying to really optimize your paywalls extremely easy. And so that's kind of, I guess, in a nutshell. But I talked for a very long time, as I tend to do. So there you go. That's Revenue Cat's kind of pitch.
And so, as you said, now you also do paywalls. So let's get started and talk about paywalls together.
Let's do it.
So what's the plan for the video? We've tried to put together 8 tips to design great paywalls, and I guess our goal when we prepared the content with Charlie was to share best practices, to share what can work for a great paywall. And as we're going to see, the key to finding the best paywall for your app is not only to follow best practices, but to experiment a lot to see what really works with your specific audience.
Yeah, and I mean, the first slide here is it's a little patronizing, but it's like, what is a paywall? Which obviously anybody watching this video knows what a paywall is. But the reason we like to talk about this at the beginning of these conversations is to kind of set the tone for, like, a paywall is kind of different than the rest of your app. It has this like singular job that is different than anything else, which is it needs to convert your users into subscribers, right? The rest of your app is all about providing value to your users through whatever it is that your app does, right? And obviously within that, there's converting subscriber users to subscribers as well. But a paywall is kind of this singular piece of your app whose job is just this piece of the funnel, to move people into subscribers. And so you kind of, at least I think of it different than I think of most of my like sort of product parts of the app in terms of the way I think about it. So anyway, it's like a little bit of a patronizing slide sometimes, but I think the important framework for why this next slide is extremely important, which is to test everything. I know in the world of like product, this is debatable. Like there's some companies that are like, test every single shade of blue and see which one gets the most clicks, and there's some that are like, we don't do any user testing at all because this is an artistic vision that we're following, that kind of thing. But I think with paywalls, you kind of can't not think about it as this piece of your funnel, which means you really do need to be testing what works and what doesn't. And so, as you kind of already alluded to, there's no really best practices that are going to work for every app. And this applies not just because like a health and fitness app is going to be different than a photo app, but also within like your competitors are probably going to behave totally different, because most likely you have a different like cohort of users that are going to behave differently. And so what works for your competitor might completely not work at all for you. And so we're big proponents of testing everything, which is why we built a whole bunch of features into RevenueCat itself for doing these types of experiments, because we think it's that important. And it makes a conceit of a talk like this a little difficult, because it's like, here's the best things to do to make your paywall great. And in reality, there isn't a best thing to do. There's a bunch of ideas that you can try. And you're going to hear as we go through the rest of these slides, every single one of them is probably going to end with, but you should test this because it might not actually work for you and it might actually harm you.
Yeah, and personally, like you said, the paywall is this very special part of your app. Personally, I like to think of it as like the salesperson of your app. And if you
Yeah.
consider your own experiences, like you deal with like several salespeople in your life, the one trying to sell you a house, a car, and you always find that some of the sales experience worked better with you than others. And it's kind of the same idea for your users. You want to sell to them in a specific way, and you don't sell the same way on like I guess a well-being app than, for instance, a learning app, than a utility app that you use for your business. It's very different experiences, and the same things will not click in the same way.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And like something I've heard, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily the best practicer of this yet, but like something I hear a lot internally people talk about, which is you can't even take an experiment that you've run in the past as gospel anymore, because once it's been a couple years, your users might be totally different by that point too. And so people who are really into this, they basically always want to be running some experiment, even if you don't have a certain thing that you're
Oh
like
yes,
actively working on right now. It's like, if you have free time, just test one of your old things that you thought was nailed down and just make sure that your priors are actually still true, because you might realize you're just leaving a whole bunch of money on the table because it no longer works for all sorts of different reasons.
exactly. That's what I was about to say. It's like, I guess it's the ultimate experience where any percentage that it converts better translates directly to money. Usually it's
Yeah.
like the product is better, so people will use it more, so like it will lead to more money. But here it's straight to the point, more money. Like you are taking more money, so that's a big motivation to be experimenting more, I find.
Yeah, although I think it's important to note, actually this screenshot I have, this is from RevenueCats. Again, I know I'm like pitching RevenueCat. You can use other experimenting tools, but something to always keep in mind, to the point you just made, is yes, a paywall translates kind of directly to money, but there's actually layers of abstraction there. Because most apps have a trial. If you're only testing how many of your users are tapping on this button, you might be testing how effective you are at converting someone to a trial, but the way you set that paywall up might actually, almost every single one of those people might start the trial and immediately end it, right?
That's very true.
Um, and so you want to make sure you're testing your paywall behavior through the entire like subscription lifecycle. Which
Yeah, that,
in this example right here, this is realized. You can also, you can track conversions or trial starts. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can test, but trial starts, the amount of people who hit the continue or subscribe or whatever button doesn't necessarily actually translate directly to money.
yeah, that's true. You want to measure the right thing, definitely.
Yeah. All right. So we can get over to the first like sort of normal tip here, which is highlight annual savings over monthly. So you can see in this screenshot I have here of a definitely real app what we're talking about. I'm sure you've seen this across the App Store if you've used mobile apps at all, but this is kind of if you have multiple products with different lengths, most of the time, although again, you should test this, but most of the time people want to encourage the longer subscriptions because usually you get better or less churn on those, or you're getting more money up front, whatever the mechanics of your business are. And usually for those longer plans, you offer it at a discount compared to the shorter plans. Again, not everybody does this, but if you do, it seems like it's usually really effective to highlight what that discount is. And so in this example, you can actually see there's a weekly, a monthly, and an annual, and we're sort of highlighting, badging what the percentage off is for each one of those. And that tends to, be a strong encourager, even not even just pushing them towards the specific plan that you want, but even just the lower or the more expensive shorter plan almost acts like a price anchor, which makes the higher one, seem more
Yeah.
attractive. And so that's a good idea. Another one is to actually show the per month price even on the annual plans. So you can see in this example, it says like $7.99 a year or 66 cents a month. And that's another one that those tend to like show the math difference between the different plans, which can make that longer plan more attractive.
Yeah, and I guess I would also say that the good practice is to give as much clarity as you can as your paywall. Like, because even if the information is here, don't expect your users to do the math, because when no user takes an app and being like, yes, I'm super motivated today, I'm going to read this paywall very carefully. No one wants to do that. So you really want to lay things out that it's as easy as possible to understand. Like, think about like the kind of like ads that you see when the discount is like 60% off. They show it in big, in color, in bright yellow, bright red. It's kind of the same idea in a way.
Yeah, definitely. So the next one here is to show your paywall at the right time. So the idea here is, and you'll see a lot of the advice thrown around, especially in indie circles, is to show it early and show it often. I think that's in indie circles, especially thrown around a lot because you don't want to be like pushy, whenever it's like kind of a one man or small operation, you don't want to like look like you're being too salesy. And so a lot of people will never show the paywall unless somebody gets to a part of the app that's locked behind the paywall. And oftentimes users will never even know that that feature exists because you never like pushed it to them. And so one of the first things that I usually recommend to people is like, as soon as they open the app, just show the paywall. That's obviously, again, like everything, you should test and it's different for everybody. But from my experience, both as a user and on the developer side, it's like you get better, your conversion rate for somebody who's never seen your paywall is zero, always. You're always going to perform better simply by showing it. But from a user perspective, I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes you're looking for a specific type of app. You go to the app store, you look at a bunch of screenshots, 2 or 3 of them look okay. I'll usually download multiple of them, and each one I open up and I just start hunting around to find how much does this thing actually cost? Because the thing I'm actually wanting to know is what is the deal with this app? Is it a free trial for a certain number of days, or is it certain features are locked? So I personally think you're actually providing a service by showing it right. But you're certainly, I think, gonna have better conversion on that.
Yeah, and I've seen like so many people saying like show it at the end of your onboarding, or even show it like at the very beginning of the onboarding and test it, because as you say, if people have this behavior of they download multiple apps and they want to know what's the deal, maybe it will work, but it's very hard to imagine like before you said it. Actually, I had never thought that people might behave that way when they look for an app, but now that you said it, it makes total sense. And if you don't test, if you don't experiment, you will not like find out.
Yeah, and that's a good point, saying putting it at the end of onboarding. That was what I meant right away. Because yeah, no matter what, like you need to communicate the value of the app before you show the paywall, right? Which that can be on your paywall, or more often it can be part of an onboarding flow, and then the paywall is right there. But yeah, I would definitely encourage showing it early. But that's not the only time you should show it. And so I think one of the points you added here was show after an aha moment, which is definitely something I've seen a lot. Like when a user's at a sort of happier time, or they have gained some sort of value from the app, a photo sharing app, they've just shared a photo that they edited, right? Or something like that. Those can also be, higher conversion rate times.
Yeah, and it's definitely a part where apps that have a clear aha moment are at an advantage. Like I work on the photo room app, we do image editing, and so we can show like visually, give us one of your picture, we'll remove the background, put a new background. When you see it, it's very visual. The aha moment is there, and you don't need any more context than just one picture to show it, and that's a big advantage.
Yeah, photo room definitely has the advantage of like you can do that on onboarding and immediately prove, this isn't smoke and mirrors, this is real. Like give us one of your pictures and we'll
Exactly.
do the thing. Yeah, that's definitely a really good opportunity. And then the last thing on this point is and this is totally stolen from Curtis Herbert. If you're familiar with him and his app Slopes, he talks a lot about his stuff publicly. It's called Slopes Diary is his blog. Definitely recommend reading that. But he has a concept that he calls pay ramps, not just pay walls. And the idea here is like not just showing these big full screen paywalls whenever somebody gets to a certain part of your app, but to have integrated into your app little mini paywalls. You can see in these screenshots for his app Slopes. it's like a mini paywall in the settings or account part of his app right there. And it's not just a button that opens up a paywall with a bunch of stuff. That is literally the CTA to prompt Apple's in-app purchase system. And those, I've heard from multiple people that those perform, or can perform very well. And so that's another idea is not just full screen paywalls, but actually, integrate them into your app.
No, it's great. To be honest, I had never heard about params until like you just mentioned them, but I will share it with my colleagues once we've done recording the video because this idea is smart. And now that you mention it, I think Apple does it like throughout iOS.
Yeah.
For instance, now they tell you like, do you want to get Apple Care Plus from within the settings app? When you think about it, it's a kind of paywall because Apple Care Plus, it's a service like insurance is a service. So in a way, it's very similar, and we've seen Apple promote their services more and more over the years. So there are also some like inspiration to take from them.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so select the default package. This one's pretty straightforward, but the idea here is if you have multiple packages and there's one that you think is the one that you'd rather push people towards, make that the default option, or even completely get rid of all your other options and sort of hide them behind, like in this example, there's an all plans button at the bottom, but essentially it's like simplify everything so that you're reducing decision fatigue. And this makes it to where they don't have to make any decisions; they just say yes or no, basically. This is one of my personal apps, and I'm testing these two right now because I've actually heard from quite a few people that sometimes only showing one plan performs well, but oftentimes showing all of them performs better, even though it's like creating decision fatigue. I have to guess that the reason there is what we talked about earlier with the price anchoring, but I don't actually know. But this is an example. Definitely test everything here. But you should think carefully, even when you're showing all of your plans. You should think carefully about which one you show as the default, and not just think about it, but like I keep saying, test it. Because you'll often be surprised by the results, and maybe you'll back into an explanation on why that's how users behave. But yeah, it's not something you can always intuit.
Exactly. And thinking about analogies with the real world, like these two examples, they remind me a lot about how Starbucks work. Because first, they have three sizes, so just like you have. And we can kind of think that the goal is that to nudge you toward the middle one, because you're not taking the smallest one because that would be being cheap. But you're not crazy that you take the big one and you're like, okay, I took the middle one, I've been reasonable, but you've actually spent more money.
Yep.
So it's the first analogy. And the second one is to make it as easy as saying like yes, because Starbucks, they will be like, oh, you have your coffee. Do you want extra espresso? They don't say it's going to be paid even, but you just have to say yes. And they make it very easy for you to say yes. And I would say like you want to make it very easy to click on the button purchase. So like it should be enabled by default with a default option. You don't want to first have the user select an option and then click on continue.
Yeah, exactly. And like, to that point, the nice thing on at least Apple and Google platforms is like their prompt will show up and will show all the details. So like I definitely am not advocating for anything like scammy or like hiding things from users, because that's all gonna show up in churn and lower ratings and all that stuff down the board, or down the road. So, but yeah, I think reducing the amount of decisions is a good idea, but test everything, because I would have thought that only showing one option would have performed better, but I keep hearing that that's not necessarily always the case. And so I'm currently in the throes of testing that myself right now. All right. Choose the best CTA. This is, again, pretty straightforward, but it's something that I think it's easy to just pick one and then stick with it. But I've seen huge differences just by tweaking this. So like I ran a test earlier this year on one of my apps that was literally just try free and subscribe versus continue. And it was a like 20% difference in how those two performed. Literally nothing else different on my paywall. And so it's definitely a really effective lever, or it can hurt it can make things a lot worse. Yeah, you have to test because like we said earlier, all cohorts are different. So I can't say try free and subscribe is going to work amazing for you, but not work amazing for somebody else. I will say it seems like if you have a trial, having the word free in there does seem like that performs well. Also, like redeem free trial or something like that. Those are terms I've seen or heard from work really well as well. But Yeah, you have to play with it and see what performs best for your users. And like we said earlier, don't just pick one and then leave it that way for years. If you have a time in between experiments when you don't have something, this is the perfect thing to just play with because they're really easy to change, especially if you use some sort of backend service like RevenueCat to like drive what these CTAs say. Then you can literally just be like, all right, we have a couple weeks before the next experiment we're going to run. Let's try these two CTAs and see which one performs better because it's kind of an easy low hanging fruit opportunity for a potential 5-10% gain or something like that.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think like as developers, we might be a bit biased against testing CTAs because CTAs they are just string, and in code setting a string is kind of like the easiest thing to
Yeah.
do. But actually, if you ask like a psychologist or someone I don't know who works in like neuropsychology, like what happens when you read words, they must be aware that different words trigger different reactions in your brain, and so what seems like the most mundane things to us is actually far from it. But I think we are like biased. And I think it might be one of the topics where like marketers and developers have a very different point of view.
Yeah, we would probably be like, maybe we should test making it a special gradient that animates and does a
Exactly.
particle effect or something. But yeah, those, while they could potentially make a difference, the way bigger thing is just which word is there. It doesn't matter what font or anything like that.
Yeah, and like you said, like there are words like free, for instance, that will just catch your attention, and or also like playing like on caps, or to just like make a part of the sentence or the CTA like stand out, and yeah, like try and see what works best.
All right, so next one here is choosing the right hero banner. So this is obviously not all paywalls have hero banners, but it's important to think through, what the imagery is, I guess is really what this is about. So the main reason I added this was because of a thing that has been interesting me lately based on different reports I've been hearing, specifically about animations and video. So like this is the example I have here is Duolingo's, which you can see the Duolingo app is just like chock full of animations and there's all sorts of stuff moving around and everything. And so that also appears in their paywall. I don't have any inside information on Duolingo's paywalls or anything like that. I just happened to notice that one was there. But the thing that I find interesting is I've heard a lot of reports of distracting elements actually really hurting the performance of your paywall. So even though it might give the impression of quality and it might improve your brand and all of that stuff, in terms of like we talked about earlier, that sort of singular job of the paywall page, it might actually be doing damage by making it very pretty and distracting in a weird way. And I've seen this also on like App Store product pages. Is having you can have those video previews on your product page.
Yeah.
It feels like the type of thing that every app should have because it kind of exudes like this is a higher quality thing than a bunch of static images. But I've personally seen those perform at a decent rate lower than not having a video at all. And so I think the same type of thing can apply to a paywall. So that, like all of this stuff here, it doesn't mean don't put anything moving on your paywall, but do it carefully and test it, because it might perform way better. In the case of Duolingo, their app is beautiful and the team there seems to be kind of geniuses at a lot of things they do. And so I have to imagine that they've been testing this and they might be seeing that this is performing better. But you'll notice looking at a lot of big brands, if you scroll through, different brand app paywalls, you'll see a lot of them, even though they're very exciting, flashy apps and brands, a lot of their paywalls themselves look very bland by comparison. And I don't think that's an accident.
Yeah, and thinking about it, so I had the same experience at work where a video paywall converted much less than the regular paywall. And seeing the example you shared, I'm noticing one thing is that the button to close the paywall is at the very bottom. And I'm thinking if you have like a cross in the top right corner and also a beautifully animated video in the hero, so at the top of the paywall,
Mm.
you're kind of like drawing attention to a place
Oh,
that is
that's
just next to the
interesting.
close button that people actually will probably want to hit first. So that might be also like one of the things, but it's very hard to prove it without like user testing, where you just like
Yeah,
track the people's eye, and you
right.
can do that in a lab, but not like in an A/B test.
That's really interesting because yeah, when as soon as you said that, I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." You're right because they put the cancel button closest to your thumb, which would kind of be like, at the primal level of like building UIs is like maybe a no-no because it makes it easier to do. But I wonder if that is a result of trying to keep the cancel button farther away from the elements that people are immediately drawn to, which is the sort of animations. And you'll notice the features also are animated. So maybe that like
Yeah.
draws your eye down the page towards the big bright, try for $0 thing that they have. Oh yeah, see, they didn't use the word free. They used $0, which I don't know that I've ever
Yeah.
noticed that, but that's interesting.
And like given all that I've read about Duolingo, I'm sure they reached that for a lot of experimentation and
Yeah.
seeing what works. But now that I think about it, I'm thinking like, for instance, you take your paywall, you do a screenshot, you put it in like whatever like image editing tool that you like, photo room for instance, and you add blur, and it helps you like understand how people see the paywall at a glance. And maybe when you put blur on it, you notice that, oh, actually like that's what draws your attention first. Like it helps you like see the paywall just like a person that skims through it in a split second does it.
Yeah. 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 That's interesting. And obviously, also with this is like the images, a lot of paywalls are just going to be a straight up image. And so thinking about how that, like I kind of alluded to at the beginning, it's not just how does this fit with my brand, but it's also like at this particular moment in time, how does this image, what place does that put a person that's on this page, emotionally or whatever, at the point where you're wanting them to convert? And it might be different than anywhere else in your app. And so that's something to just kind of always keep in mind and test.
Always test.
Always test. All right, number 7. So we got what, 2 more left here. Don't be afraid to heavily localize. I think this one was you that added it, right?
Yes, this
All
one
right,
was from
I'll let
me
you take the
because
horns on this one. Yeah.
so I'm lucky that I've been working with a growth team with people focused. I think almost their entire focus is on the paywall, and so they try different things. And I guess it's kind of like first you optimize your paywall, then you hit kind of like a ceiling. You have a plateau of growth, and to get past this plateau, then you need to optimize for different like locales. And it makes sense. Like you don't present your features the same way in Europe than in Japan, than in Latin America. And so
Yeah.
you localize your app, but you also localize your paywall. But for the paywall, it can go further than just like translating text. It can be just like trying to get the vibe, do something that feels very like organic. This is where also apps that have like huge communities of users can leverage their communities to get good quality feedback from people that know the culture and also really like your app. But I would say definitely try it, because when you think about it, a commercial, an ad on TV is not going to look the same in Europe than it does in America, than it does in Asia. And so there is no reason for your paywall to be different.
Yeah, something that we haven't talked about here, but I see a lot is advice on like if you have like a features list, don't just list the features, list the use case or the story that the feature enables. And this is something where, in different regions, the story is going to be totally different. Like, if you have a photo editing app, photo editing is kind of a feature. Like, you can make color corrections or whatever, but maybe it's like you're highlighting the use of a beauty filter for a hair salon, which in certain regions is a big thing. But in other regions, it might be better to highlight background removal for product shots or whatever. That's where, like you said, having a big community and then leveraging them for like, what are these different regional use cases that are bigger and which ones, resonate with people in that area more, can make a really big difference. And that's not just copy changes. It's like the actual imagery or anything like that.
Yeah, and one thing where we are lucky these days is that there are actually websites that lets you do user testing with users from different parts of the world, and it can be a great way. Like if you're just getting started and you don't have a big user base, you can buy a user testing session and have someone from Latin America or someone from the US or from Europe test your app and give you like their thinking as they go through your app. And I think it can be really like enlightening, especially like when you don't know the culture at all, because it's so hard to relate to it that I mean, you basically like you don't want to do it because you know you're going to miss. You cannot like fake knowing a culture.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. It's very easy to do something very cringy, or because you fall into that uncanny valley of like,
Exactly.
you kind of get it, but you just don't because you don't live it, and it can be very bad very quickly. Have you used those user testing things yourself?
Myself, no, but my colleagues have used it, and usually it goes very well with. It's like qualitative and quantitative data. An A/B test will give you quantitative data. You will know, oh, people that much more that many more users have converted. So it can give you like some very precise numbers, like that it's extremely likely that this will lead to better conversions, but you don't know why. And user testing is about understanding that why. So usually you will have much less users involved, but you will spend more time. And basically, I would say like numbers, they will give you like correlations, but they will never help you understand causality. And
Yeah,
the user testing,
exactly.
they give you a better chance to understand causality and understand like what's the root cause of a change. Because that's something that's interesting, is that I guess something that can be very deceiving is if you see something that works, but you don't understand why. Like you're going to feel like, okay, you're going to follow the direction because it works and it brings in more revenue. But if you don't understand why, you know that it's going to get you in trouble at some time.
Yeah.
So you want to understand why something works, or at least feel like you've come up with a credible reason why. You're not sure it's the actual reason why, but you feel comfortable that if you share it with someone, they will not look at you like a crazy person. Like it seems reasonable. You understand this change had this effect, which led to this result.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everybody who's ever like handed their app to somebody and watched them use it, it's a horrifying experience because they don't use it the way you intended always. But there's always so many insights you get from that. And at least the user testing, I say I've done, colleagues have done in the past, has been like, it's usually sharing like a Figma prototype. And then it's literally a recording of somebody poking around on their phone and doing something, and you can hear them be surprised when something doesn't behave the way they wanted, which sometimes is an opportunity for delight. Most of the time is a like, we should change how that works because that wasn't what they expected and they should be expecting that. And those types of insights are incredibly valuable. All right, so we can get to number 8 here, which is build trust, which this is another one you added. I think both of us have some points here, but I'll let you
Yes.
lead us in here as well.
Yeah, so here what I wanted to share, I think the app that popularized this is Blinkist. I think it's even called the Blinkist paywall in the growth community. It's the idea that, okay, you're going to start a trial period, and on the paywall, we show you an option to say, hey, if you enable this, we'll send you a reminder the last day of your trial period, so that like it's kind of saying you can cancel at any time, but we will even remind you that you can cancel before we charge you. And I guess the underlying idea is to build as much trust as possible with the user. It's kind of like saying the message, look, we are not a scam, and we are so confident that we have real value that we will make it as easy for you to cancel. But since we trust our product, we know that you won't want to cancel. And I guess it can be very powerful. As with everything, you want to test it. But for
Yeah.
apps where maybe like if you're in a field where there have been so many scammy apps that like people have been burnt before, doing this can be a nice way to say, okay, we're the good guys, and we're not just saying it, we are proving it with everything we can.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like this is where, your specific cohort matters because yeah, if the context of your app is in the midst of a bunch of really not trustworthy apps, users are going to come in automatically with distrust. Or if you're like switching, like if in the early days of subscriptions when people were less used to it, that was an area where it's low trust. I think this also is like you mentioned testing, but like this is kind of a perfect example of what I was talking about towards the beginning with making sure you're testing the whole subscription journey, because I would imagine a paywall like this is going to have way, like not way, but like a decent higher performance in trial starts, but it probably also has a higher churn on those trials, which isn't bad. Like that doesn't necessarily matter. What matters is the end result, which is your actual lifetime value. And you probably want to track those users over their lifetime, because the users who do stick with you because you built up this higher trust, not just your paywall. Obviously, this is the whole journey. But if you've built a higher trust with that cohort of users, they might churn or have a higher retention rate than other cohorts because of that, right? Even longer than just did they convert off of the trial or not. And so I don't know. There's a lot of variables here, but I think it's also just kind of like a good thing to do, to treat users respectfully and build that trust there.
Yeah, but like you said, I think indeed maybe apps that are here for the long term with the user, like Blinkist is an audiobooks app with like I think they show like they I think they give digest of books, so it's like shorter if I remember it correctly.
Yeah.
And you can imagine like audiobook apps, they're here for the long term. I feel it's been more than 10 years since I've been seeing like Audible commercials. So indeed, like it's brands that are there for the long term. And I would also say if you do this kind of paywall, make sure that you are really reliable on sending these notifications, because you don't
Yeah.
want to have a bug and then not send them, because it's the worst thing you could do. So like make sure that you test, maybe deploy it progressively, but be very careful, because like your reputation, it's very easy to destroy, and it's a typical use case where an app can get a bad reputation very fast.
Yeah, that's true. Like if you stake your claim on something like high trustworthiness, like it makes me think of like when Apple does something a little shady, it usually blows back on them way harder than if a different company that hasn't built this like branding and reputation on privacy focus or whatever. It's a bigger deal if you promised to be this certain way and then you weren't, than if you just weren't in the first place. And so yeah, you have to be truly committed to that if you're gonna make that promise.
Absolutely. But for instance, if like you're a company that maybe had a mediocre reputation but trying to launch an app and try to do things differently, it can be like a great way to regain the user trust. I'm thinking typically, I guess like everything around like cable operators, where it's very easy to subscribe and very hard to unsubscribe. And it's been so much known that people are very aware. Like I don't live in the US and I'm aware of it. We
Yeah.
have the equivalent in France. Don't worry, we have the same version in France. But I'm aware of it, and it's true that I had always been thinking I will never subscribe to one of these services. But once I did, because I could subscribe through an in-app purchase that I knew I could cancel from the App Store
Yeah.
at any time, and it helped me like have this trust that like I've been in a situation where it was so hard to unsubscribe that I was like, my credit card is expiring in 2 months, so I will just let the credit card expire. And when they can charge me, they will cancel my subscription. It will be easier than spending 3 hours with customer support. You don't
Yeah.
want to be in that situation.
Yeah. That just creates a scenario where they're so much less likely to do what should be a low commitment trial of your app. They're just gonna bounce if they're like,
Exactly.
yeah, you have to prove that your value is worth years of using the service and then a bunch of pain and trying to cancel it, which yeah, you don't want to be in that situation.
And to be honest, the App Store and the Play Store, they do a great job at enforcing some ground rules, like making it very easy to cancel subscription. And it makes it
Yeah.
easy for paywalls to convince users to trust them, because there is this foundation that is guaranteed by Apple, by Google, and users know that they can rely on it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so those are 8 tips.
All right, so that was it. We went over the 8 tips to design great paywalls. I hope you've learned something new. I've learned something new, and I've been working on paywalls for a year and a half. So I'm really happy with the content we've covered today. And like I said in the intro, this video is sponsored by RevenueCat, and there is a specific reason for it. It's because RevenueCat has recently launched a paywall feature. So to conclude, I guess, Charlie, you want to tell us a little bit about this feature?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned it at the beginning, but we have a paywall UI framework now. So the idea here is you can build, and I have the website here, but you can build a paywall on our dashboard on the website and then render it natively with Swift UI on iOS. and I believe I'm going to say Jetpack Compose on Android. I don't remember specifically what the framework is, but it's native on Android as well. And you can render those paywalls through our framework in your app, and it's completely controlled by the backend. And this, as you would imagine, based on everything that I've been saying, this is hooked directly into our experiments feature, as well as our offerings model, if you're familiar with RevenueCat already, which makes it incredibly easy to duplicate a paywall, make a small change, and then test that, see how it performs. It's also great for, like, if you're running a sale or something like that, you can just spin up a little Black Friday paywall and then turn it on during Black Friday and then turn it right back off. It's really exciting. It's a new area for us, and I've been having a blast working with the team that's been building it, and me asking them for little features here and there. And everybody's just super excited about it. And I think we've built something extremely compelling. And one of the things that's kind of unique about it is it's not just and actually we might have a little thing here. Yeah, here you go. It's not just kind of your normal full screen paywall that you build on our website that we then render. You can also render just the products at the bottom with the CTA, and then you can put your own native code behind it, which means you're kind of free to do literally anything you want. This is actually what I've been using mostly in my personal apps. And so there's like an infinite amount of flexibility that you can do, but also you can still have it all be controlled from the back end and run all these experiments. And so we're really excited about it, and we want more and more people to try them out. And the cool thing is these are available on our free tier. So if you're a smaller app, there's literally no cost to trying this. So it's definitely worth checking out, and we're hoping to get more and more people to try it.
And as we've said, it's important to test everything with paywalls. And from my experience, the key to doing tests regularly and at scale is to have great tooling that's going to support these tests. So this looks great. And of course, if you want to learn more about it and give it a try, you've got the link in the description to try these new paywalls from RevenueCat.
Sweet.
All right, that's all for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks again, Charlie, for joining, and RevenueCat for sponsoring this video.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun, so I definitely enjoyed it.
It's been a lot of fun for me too. And I guess I just have to say thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.